She walked into his office with her chin raised and her curves filling out that emerald dress like she owned the world. And when Connor Hayes tried his usual intimidation routine, Natalie Brooks just smiled and said, "Is that really the best you've got?" In that moment, the man who'd made 43 interns quit knew he'd finally met his match. Before we start, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video and comment where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories. And trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's continue. The 32nd floor of the Millennium Plaza Tower offered Connor Hayes a perfect view of Lake Michigan's frozen shoreline, but he wasn't looking at the scenery. His steel-gray eyes were fixed on the young man sitting across from his mahogany desk, watching as another intern crumbled under pressure. "Mr. Hayes, I just need a few more days to. You need to pack your things." Connor's voice cut through the heated office air like January wind. At 34, he'd mastered the art of controlled intimidation, his 6'2" frame filling out his charcoal Tom Ford suit with a kind of authority that made grown men stutter. "Security will escort you out." The intern, what was his name? Tyler? Trevor? Gathered his tablet with shaking hands. "But sir, I've only been here 3 weeks. The project isn't finished, and I can learn." The project required competence. You've demonstrated you lack it. Connor stood, his broad shoulders casting a shadow across the desk. HR will process your termination paperwork. And that makes 43, he thought as the office door clicked shut. 43 interns in 18 months. The board was starting to ask questions, but Connor had answers. Standards mattered. Excellence wasn't negotiable. If these kids couldn't handle the pressure of working at Hayes Industries, they had no business in corporate America. His assistant Monica knocked softly before entering, her usually perfect composure slightly frayed. "Mr. Hayes? The new intern starts today. Ms. Brooks from Northwestern University." Connor returned to his leather chair, already reaching for his coffee. Colombian dark roast, black, hot enough to strip paint. "Send her up in 10 minutes. Let's see if she lasts longer than Tuesday's disaster." Monica hesitated. "Sir, maybe we could." 10 minutes, Monica. Alone again, Connor allowed himself 30 seconds to massage his temples. The February board meeting was next week, and the Anderson account was hemorrhaging money faster than his interns quit. 3 years of building Hayes Industries into Chicago's premier marketing firm, and he still felt like he was fighting battles on every front. His phone buzzed with a text from his younger brother Jake. "Dinner tonight? It's Valentine's Day, and even workaholic CEOs need to eat." Connor deleted the message without responding. Valentine's Day was just another Tuesday when you'd learned that promises were temporary and trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. 23-year-old Natalie Brooks stood in front of her bathroom mirror, applying the last coat of deep red lipstick that matched her confidence and complemented her olive skin tone. Her reflection showed a woman who'd inherited her grandmother's hourglass figure and her mother's determination. Both had served her well through 4 years at Northwestern. "You've got this, Nat," she whispered to her reflection, smoothing down the emerald wrap dress that hugged her curves in all the right places. The color brought out the amber flecks in her dark brown eyes, and she'd chosen it deliberately. First impressions mattered, especially when you were walking into a company with a CEO who apparently ate interns for breakfast. Her phone rang as she slipped into her black stilettos, professional but with just enough heel to put her at eye level with most men. "Natalie, how are you feeling about your first day?" Her best friend Ashley's voice carried the usual mix of excitement and concern. "Nervous, excited, ready to prove myself." Natalie grabbed her leather portfolio and headed toward the door of her studio apartment. "I've done my research on Connor Hayes. Graduated summa cum laude from Wharton, built his company from nothing, increased revenue by 300% in 3 years. And made 40-something interns quit," Ashley added helpfully. 43, according to LinkedIn gossip. "But I'm not them." Natalie locked her door and headed down the narrow hallway of her building. I didn't graduate top 10% of my class and land this internship to run away from the first difficult boss I encounter. The truth was more complicated than she let on. This internship wasn't just about career advancement, it was about survival. Her student loans were crushing, her part-time barista job barely covered groceries, and her parents had already sacrificed enough sending her to college. Her father still worked double shifts at the Ford plant in Dearborn, and her mother cleaned office buildings at night. This internship could change everything. Just be careful, okay? Ashley's voice softened. Some of those former interns posted pretty harsh reviews online. They say he's brutal. Then they weren't strong enough. Natalie pushed through the building's front door into the biting February morning. Snow crunched under her heels as she walked toward the L station. I've handled worse than one difficult CEO. Much worse, she thought, remembering professors who dismissed her ideas because of her appearance, study groups where she'd been ignored until they needed her notes, job interviews where men spent more time staring at her chest than listening to her qualifications. She'd learned to use their underestimation as fuel. The train ride downtown gave her 20 minutes to review her portfolio one final time. Marketing campaign analyses, demographic studies, social media strategies, everything designed to show Connor Hayes that she belonged in his company. She'd studied his work, memorized his company's client list, and prepared responses to every possible question. What she hadn't prepared for was the way her heart would race when she saw his name on the building directory. Hayes Industries occupied floors 30 through 35 of the Millennium Plaza Tower. The lobby screamed success, marble floors, abstract art that probably cost more than her annual tuition, and a reception desk that looked like something from a sci-fi movie. Natalie Brooks, she told the receptionist, a polished woman in her 40s. I'm the new intern. The woman's smile faltered slightly. Oh, yes, of course. Take the elevator to 32. Ask for Monica, she's Mr. Hayes' assistant. The elevator ride felt endless. 30 floors to think about everything that could go wrong, everything she had riding on this opportunity, everything she'd worked for. When the doors opened, she stepped into a world of glass offices, expensive furniture, and employees who moved with a kind of purpose that came from either loving their jobs or fearing their boss. Monica turned out to be a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and the slightly frazzled look of someone who'd spent years managing a difficult personality. You must be Natalie, Monica said, standing from her desk outside the corner office. I have to warn you, Mr. Hayes is particular about his standards. I wouldn't expect anything less, Natalie replied, adjusting her portfolio under her arm. I'm here to work, not to get comfortable. Something shifted in Monica's expression. Approval, maybe, or hope. He's ready for you now. Natalie took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and walked toward the door that would change everything. The corner office door was solid oak with frosted glass panels that revealed nothing but shadows. Natalie knocked twice, firm, confident, and waited for permission to enter. Come in. The voice was deeper than she'd expected, carrying the kind of authority that made people straighten their spines without thinking. Natalie turned the handle and stepped into Connor Hayes' domain. The office was a study in controlled power. Floor-to-ceiling windows dominated two walls, offering a panoramic view of Chicago's skyline and the frozen lake beyond. The furniture was expensive but understated, dark wood, leather chairs, everything positioned with military precision. Awards and accolades lined one wall, but what caught Natalie's attention was the complete absence of personal items. No family photos, no vacation souvenirs, nothing that revealed the man behind the CEO facade. Connor Hayes sat behind his desk like a king holding court. He was younger than she'd expected, mid-30s at most, with dark hair that looked like he'd run his fingers through it and steel-gray eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of her appearance. His suit was perfectly tailored, emphasizing broad shoulders and the kind of build that suggested he worked out religiously. Handsome, she admitted grudgingly, in that dangerous way that made smart women do stupid things. Those gray eyes swept over her once, clinical and dismissive, before returning to the documents spread across his desk. Natalie Brooks, he said without looking up. Northwestern University, marketing degree, 3.8 GPA. He finally raised his eyes to meet hers. Tell me why you think you can succeed where 43 others have failed. Straight to the point. No pleasantries, no welcome speech. Natalie had prepared for this moment, but standing under that steel-gray stare felt different than practicing in her mirror. Because I'm not here to survive, Mr. Hayes. I'm here to excel. She moved closer to his desk, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Your previous interns failed because they came here hoping you'd be easy on them. I came here hoping you'd be exactly as demanding as your reputation suggests. Connor's pen stopped moving across the paper. For the first time since she'd entered, she had his complete attention. Is that so? He leaned back in his chair, studying her with new interest. And what makes you think my reputation is something to aspire to rather than avoid? Because easy bosses don't build companies that increase revenue by 300% in 3 years. Natalie opened her portfolio and placed a bound presentation on his desk. They don't land clients like Anderson Corp or revolutionize digital marketing strategies for Fortune 500 companies. They don't create the kind of workplace where excellence isn't just expected, it's demanded. Connor glanced at the presentation but didn't touch it. Flattery, Ms. Brooks. Facts, Mr. Hayes. She met his stare without flinching. I've spent the last month studying every campaign your company has produced, every client testimonial, every industry award. You don't accept mediocrity, which means working here would push me to be better than I've ever been. That's exactly what I want. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or calculation. Connor picked up her presentation and flipped through the first few pages. His expression remained neutral, but Natalie caught the slight tightening around his eyes that suggested he was actually reading. Your analysis of our Anderson campaign, he said after a long moment. You identify 3 areas for improvement. Yes, sir. Explain the second point. Natalie had hoped he'd ask. Your demographic targeting focuses heavily on the 35 to 54 age bracket, which makes sense given Anderson's traditional customer base. But you're missing a significant opportunity with millennials who are aging into their prime earning years. A parallel campaign targeting 25 to 34-year-olds with modified messaging could increase engagement by at least 20%. Connor closed the presentation and set it aside. That demographic research took you how long? 3 weeks of evenings and weekends. And you did this without being asked, before you'd even been hired. I wanted to be prepared. The silence stretched between them, heavy with evaluation. Connor stood and walked to the windows, his hands clasped behind his back. From this angle, Natalie could see the tension in his shoulders, the careful control in every movement. Tell me about your previous work experience, he said without turning around. I've been working since I was 16. Retail, restaurants, tutoring, whatever paid the bills. Last 2 years I managed social media for 3 local businesses while maintaining my GPA and completing my degree. Family money? The question was invasive, probably illegal, but Natalie answered anyway. My father works at the Ford plant. My mother cleans offices. They've sacrificed everything to help me get here, and I won't waste their investment. Connor turned back to face her, and something in his expression had shifted. Respect, maybe. Or recognition. The Anderson account is hemorrhaging money, he said bluntly. 3 months behind schedule, client satisfaction dropping weekly, and my team seems incapable of identifying the core problem. If you're as prepared as you claim, what's your assessment? This was it. The test that would determine everything. You're treating symptoms instead of diagnosing the disease, Natalie said without hesitation. Anderson came to you because their brand was stagnating, but your team is applying the same strategies that work for your other clients. Anderson doesn't need a marketing makeover. They need a complete brand resurrection. Their problem isn't visibility, it's relevance. Connor's eyebrows rose slightly. Continue. Their target demographic has evolved, but their messaging hasn't. They're still selling to the customer they had 10 years ago instead of the customer they need today. Your team is polishing a message that was already outdated before they started. And your solution? Natalie pulled a second folder from her portfolio. Complete brand audit, new demographic analysis, and a phased rollout that bridges their legacy customers with their future market. It's all in here: timeline, budget projections, risk assessment. Connor took the folder, his fingers brushing hers briefly. The contact sent an unexpected jolt up her arm, and from the way his eyes sharpened, she suspected he'd felt it too. He flipped through her proposal, his expression unreadable. You developed this entire strategy based on publicly available information? And 3 informational interviews with Anderson employees who were willing to talk off the record. You contacted Anderson employees directly? I contacted former Anderson employees who are now working at competitor firms. They were happy to discuss their previous company's challenges. For the first time since she'd entered his office, Connor Hayes smiled. It was barely a curve of his lips, gone almost before she registered it, but it transformed his entire face. Clever, he admitted. Ethically questionable, but clever. I prefer resourceful, Natalie replied. And everything I learned is information they could have gathered themselves with proper research protocols. Connor closed the folder and returned to his desk. 43 interns, Ms. Brooks. 43 bright, ambitious, well-educated candidates who thought they could handle working here. Some lasted a week. The longest made it 3 weeks and 2 days before deciding corporate life wasn't for them. What's your point, Mr. Hayes? My point is that I don't coddle employees. I don't provide gentle feedback or positive reinforcement for meeting basic expectations. I don't care about your feelings, your personal life, or your need for work-life balance. I care about results, competence, and excellence. Nothing else matters. Natalie stepped closer to his desk, close enough to see the gold flecks in his gray eyes, close enough to catch the subtle scent of his cologne. Something expensive and masculine that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Good, she said firmly. Because I'm not here for a therapy session or a cheerleading squad. I'm here to learn from the best, contribute to exceptional work, and prove that I belong in this industry. If you want to throw everything you've got at me, bring it on. I can handle whatever you dish out. The challenge hung in the air between them, electric and dangerous. Connor studied her for a long moment, his expression calculating. Then he reached for his phone. Monica, clear my schedule for the next hour. And send the Anderson files to conference room B. He hung up and looked at Natalie. You have 60 minutes to present your strategy to the Anderson team. If they're impressed, you stay. If they're not. He shrugged. Security knows the way to the elevator. Natalie's heart hammered against her ribs, but her voice remained steady. When do we start? We don't start anything, Ms. Brooks. This is your show. Connor stood and buttoned his suit jacket. But I'll be watching every minute of it. As he walked past her toward the door, Natalie caught that expensive cologne again and something else, the faint scent of challenge and possibility that made her pulse quicken. Mr. Hayes, she called as he reached the door. He turned back, one eyebrow raised in question. Is that really the best you've got? For a moment, Connor Hayes looked like a man who'd just been dealt a hand he hadn't expected. Then that almost smile returned, sharper this time and infinitely more dangerous. We'll see, Ms. Brooks. We'll see. Conference room B was a glass-walled testament to corporate intimidation. A polished mahogany table stretched down the center, surrounded by 12 leather chairs that had probably cost more than Natalie's car. The Anderson files were already waiting, 3 thick binders that looked like they could crush her confidence if she let them. 5 members of Connor's senior team filed in behind him, their expressions ranging from curious to openly skeptical. Natalie recognized them from a company website. Patricia Mullins, Director of Client Relations, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who looked like she could negotiate peace treaties before lunch. Trevor Park, Head of Creative, whose deliberately messy hair and designer glasses screamed artistic genius, and 3 other department heads whose names she'd memorized along with their professional backgrounds. Connor took the chair at the head of the table, his posture relaxed but predatory. Team, meet Natalie Brooks, our newest intern. She believes she's identified the core issue with the Anderson account and has a solution to present. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. An intern. Patricia's voice carried the kind of polite skepticism that could cut glass. Connor, we've been working this account for 8 months. Our research team has conducted extensive. 60 minutes, Connor interrupted, checking his Rolex. Starting now. Sink or swim. No safety net, no second chances. Natalie opened the first Anderson binder and pulled out the client brief, her hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She'd presented to professors, to small business owners, even to her ruthlessly honest mother, but never to a room full of executives who clearly viewed her as an amusing distraction. Anderson Corporation hired Hayes Industries because their market share has declined 18% over the past 2 years, she began, moving to the whiteboard at the front of the room. Your team has focused on increasing brand visibility through traditional marketing channels, print ads, digital campaigns, social media engagement. She drew a simple graph showing Anderson's declining sales figures. But visibility was never Anderson's problem. Recognition isn't the issue when you're a 100-year-old company with 96% brand awareness in your target demographic. Trevor leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Then what exactly do you think the problem is? Relevance. Natalie turned from the whiteboard to face the table. Anderson's customer base is aging out of their primary purchasing years, but their messaging hasn't evolved. They're still selling to the same demographic they targeted in 2010, using the same value propositions that worked when their customers were 35, not 55. She could see Connor in her peripheral vision, his expression unreadable but attentive. The other team members exchanged glances that clearly said, "Let's humor the new girl." Our demographic research shows, Patricia began. Your demographic research is 18 months old and focused on existing customers rather than potential markets, Natalie interrupted, then immediately softened her tone. Which makes sense for retention strategies, but Anderson doesn't need retention. They need acquisition. The room fell silent. Apparently, interrupting the Director of Client Relations was not standard intern behavior. Connor's voice cut through the tension. Explain. Natalie opened her portfolio and began distributing copies of her analysis. Anderson's core demographic, ages 45 to 65, represents 78% of their current sales. But this group's purchasing power in Anderson's product category peaks at age 52 and then declines steadily. Meanwhile, the 25 to 40 demographic represents only 12% of current sales but has increasing disposable income and growing interest in Anderson's product category. We've tried targeting younger demographics, Trevor said, glancing at Connor. Response rates were abysmal. Because you used the same messaging that appeals to 50-year-olds, Natalie replied. Value, tradition, reliability. Those concepts resonate with established consumers. But 28-year-olds don't buy products because they're traditional. They buy products that make them feel innovative, unique, ahead of the curve. She moved to the second page of her handout. Anderson has a heritage story that could be revolutionary if positioned correctly. Instead of selling tradition, sell evolution. Instead of "we've been trusted for 100 years, try "we've been innovating for 100 years. The room was quiet now, actually listening instead of waiting for her to finish. Patricia studied the demographic breakdown with professional interest. These market segments. Where did you source this data? Combination of census information, consumer spending reports, and trend analysis from 3 different market research firms, plus interviews with 12 consumers in the target demographic. You conducted primary research? Connor's voice carried a note of surprise. I needed to understand the disconnect between Anderson's brand perception and consumer expectations. Natalie moved to the whiteboard again, drawing 2 columns. Current Anderson messaging focuses on heritage, reliability, and proven performance. Target demographic priorities are innovation, personalization, and social impact. She wrote examples under each column, showing the stark contrast between Anderson's current approach and what their potential customers actually wanted to hear. This is all very interesting, Patricia said carefully, but restructuring an entire brand messaging strategy requires months of testing, focus groups, budget approval. Which is why I'm proposing a parallel campaign, Natalie interrupted again. Keep the existing strategy for current customers, while testing new messaging with younger demographics. Small budget, targeted deployment, measurable results within 60 days. Connor leaned forward. Budget requirements. 15% of current Anderson allocation. Focus on digital channels where the target demographic actually consumes media. Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn for professional segments. Skip traditional print entirely for the test campaign. TikTok. Trevor's voice dripped skepticism. For a B2B industrial company? For a company whose potential customers spend 43 minutes per day on TikTok, yes. Natalie pulled out her phone and showed a video she'd bookmarked. This manufacturing company gained 2.3 million followers in 6 months by showing behind-the-scenes innovation content. Anderson could do something similar, show the technology, the process evolution, the young engineers developing next-generation solutions. The room was actually paying attention now. She could see wheels turning, possibilities being calculated. Connor checked his watch. 30 minutes remaining. Implementation timeline. Phase 1 launches in 2 weeks with content creation starting immediately. I've already identified 3 potential filming locations at Anderson facilities and drafted initial content concepts. Natalie distributed another handout. Phase 2 expands successful content types after 30-day performance review. Phase 3 integrates successful elements into the broader campaign strategy. You've drafted content concepts? Patricia's skepticism was giving way to professional curiosity. 15 video concepts, 20 static post designs, and 3 different messaging frameworks. Everything's in the appendix of your packets. Trevor flipped to the back of his handout, his expression shifting as he reviewed her creative concepts. These are, actually, not terrible. High praise from the head of creative, apparently. Connor stood and walked to the whiteboard, studying her demographic breakdown. Projected ROI. Conservative estimate, 12% increase in target demographic engagement within 60 days, with potential for 25% if content resonates strongly. Cost per acquisition should be 30 to 40% lower than current campaign performance due to higher engagement rates in digital channels. And if it fails? Natalie met his stare directly. Then you've spent 15% of 1 month's budget to definitively prove that the current strategy is optimal. Either way, you have data-driven proof of the best path forward. The silence stretched for nearly a minute. Connor returned to his seat, his expression calculating. Questions for Ms. Brooks, he asked his team. Patricia raised her hand slightly. The consumer interviews you conducted, what was your sample size and methodology? 12 in-depth interviews, 47 survey responses, stratified by age, income, and geographic location. I used a combination of online surveys and coffee shop intercepts in Lincoln Park, River North, and Wicker Park to get diverse perspectives. Coffee shop intercepts. Trevor looked amused. Bought a lot of lattes. Started conversations about brands and purchasing decisions. People are surprisingly willing to share opinions when you're genuinely listening. Connor's almost smile flickered again. Time. Natalie gathered her materials, her heart hammering but her hands steady. She'd given them everything: research, strategy, implementation plan, creative concepts, budget projections. If this wasn't enough to prove her value, nothing would be. "Thank you for your time," she said formally. "I'm happy to answer any additional questions or provide more detailed analysis of any aspect of the proposal." Connor stood. "Team, your assessments?" "The research is solid," Patricia admitted grudgingly. "More thorough than I expected from an intern." "Creative concepts show potential," Trevor added. "Would need refinement, but the direction is interesting." The other team members nodded agreement. Not enthusiastic endorsement, but not dismissal either. Connor looked at Natalie. "Ms. Brooks, return to my office in 15 minutes. Team, I want full implementation projections on my desk by end of day." As the senior staff filed out, Natalie caught fragments of their conversations. Impressive for an intern, might actually work, bold strategy. Connor paused at the door. 1 hour, Ms. Brooks. Not bad. Then he was gone, leaving Natalie alone with the conference room's expensive furniture and the lingering scent of his cologne. She'd survived round 1. But something in Connor's expression suggested the real test was just beginning. The Anderson presentation had been 9 hours ago, and Natalie was still at her temporary desk outside Connor's office, refining content concepts while the rest of the building slowly emptied. The skeletal crew of security guards and late-night cleaners moved through the halls like ghosts, their footsteps echoing against marble floors. She'd expected Connor to dismiss her after the conference room meeting. Instead, he'd assigned her to Patricia's team with instructions to prove your strategy works. The last 9 hours had been a whirlwind of budget approvals, content development, and the kind of collaborative energy she'd only dreamed about during her Northwestern projects. Patricia had even smiled at her. Once. The weather outside had been deteriorating all day. What started as light snow that morning had evolved into something the meteorologists were calling a historic Valentine's Day blizzard. Through the massive windows, Natalie could see Lake Shore Drive disappearing under sheets of white, and the wind was howling loud enough to penetrate the building's insulation. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ashley. "CTA shut down. Streets impassable. Please tell me you're somewhere safe." Natalie glanced around the nearly empty office. Safe was relative, but she was definitely warm and dry. Connor emerged from his office, loosening his tie with the kind of casual gesture that probably made his female employees lose focus. He discarded his suit jacket hours ago, and his white dress shirt was rolled up to reveal forearms that suggested he spent serious time in a gym. "Still here, Ms. Brooks. Finishing the content calendar for next week's shoots." She gestured toward her laptop screen, which displayed a detailed timeline of video concepts, shooting locations, and production requirements. "I wanted to have everything ready before." The lights flickered, plunging the office into momentary darkness before the backup generators kicked in. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the expensive furniture, and somewhere in the building, an alarm began to sound. "Power grid failure," Connor said calmly, checking his phone. "Building's on backup power until further notice." Natalie saved her work quickly. "I should probably try to get home before." "No." Connor's voice was firm. "Look outside." She moved to the windows and felt her stomach drop. The storm had intensified beyond anything she'd seen in her 23 years of Chicago winters. Snow was falling so thick she couldn't see the building across the street, and the wind was bending traffic lights nearly horizontal. A few abandoned cars dotted Lake Shore Drive like snow-covered monuments to poor timing. "The National Weather Service issued a travel ban 20 minutes ago," Connor continued, reading from his phone. Nobody moves until morning. Building security is setting up emergency accommodations in the break rooms for anyone who got stranded. Stranded. With Connor Hayes. For the entire night. There's a couch in conference room A, she said, trying to keep her voice professional. I can set up there and be out of your way. Conference room A has no heat. Backup power is limited to essential systems only. Connor pocketed his phone and walked toward his office. There's a full bathroom in my office, emergency supplies in the credenza, and a leather couch that's more comfortable than most hotel beds. Natalie felt heat rise in her cheeks. Mr. Hayes, I couldn't possibly. Ms. Brooks. He turned to face her, and his expression was unreadable. It's a business decision. I need you functional tomorrow, not sick from sleeping in a freezing conference room. My office has independent heating and enough space for both of us to work comfortably. Work. Right. This was about work. What about you? I've spent plenty of nights in this office. I have spare clothes, toiletries, everything I need. He gestured toward his door. Unless you'd prefer to risk hypothermia for the sake of propriety? The rational part of her brain knew he was right. The emotional part was screaming warnings about spending the night alone with a man who'd already proven he could unsettle her with a single look. But she'd told him she could handle whatever he threw at her. Thank you, she said formally. I appreciate the accommodation. Connor's office looked different in the emergency lighting, larger somehow, more intimate. The city lights that usually glittered beyond the windows were obscured by snow, making the space feel like a luxury cabin suspended above the world. There's a mini fridge behind the bookshelf, Connor said, moving around his desk to open a cabinet she hadn't noticed before. Water, some decent wine, leftover takeout from lunch. Help yourself to whatever you need. He pulled out a navy sweater and jeans from what appeared to be a well-stocked emergency wardrobe. I'm going to change. The bathroom's through that door if you need it. Alone in Connor Hayes's office. This was definitely not covered in any internship manual. Natalie used the bathroom, which was indeed nicer than most hotel suites, complete with marble fixtures and luxury toiletries, then explored the mini fridge. Connor hadn't been kidding about the decent wine. A bottle of Caymus Cabernet that probably cost more than her monthly grocery budget sat next to bottled water and containers of what looked like gourmet Chinese food. When Connor returned, she barely recognized him. Gone was the intimidating CEO in his armor of expensive suits. The man who emerged from the bathroom wore dark jeans that fit him perfectly and a navy sweater that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. His dark hair was slightly mussed, and without the formal business attire, he looked younger, more approachable. More dangerous. Better? He asked, noticing her stare. You look human. Real. Like someone I might actually want to know. More comfortable. Connor opened the mini fridge and pulled out the wine. This situation calls for something stronger than coffee. You drink wine. I'm technically still working. Ms. Brooks. He was already opening the bottle with practiced efficiency. We're stranded in a blizzard on Valentine's Day. Normal office protocols are suspended. Valentine's Day. She'd completely forgotten. I don't usually drink with my boss, she said, accepting the glass he offered. I don't usually get trapped in my office with employees. Connor settled into one of the leather chairs near the windows, gesturing for her to take the other. Seems like a night for breaking precedent. The wine was incredible, rich and complex with hints of dark chocolate and coffee. Natalie could taste why it cost so much, though she'd never admit she recognized the difference. Tell me about the consumer interviews, Connor said, surprising her with the topic shift. How did you really get people to open up about their purchasing decisions? Honestly? I bought them coffee and listened like their opinions mattered. Natalie tucked her legs under her in the chair, the wine beginning to relax her shoulders. Most market research feels like interrogation. People get defensive when they think you're judging their choices. And you didn't judge. Everyone has reasons for what they buy. My job was to understand the reasons, not evaluate them. She took another sip of wine. Like this woman named Rebecca, she's 29, works in marketing for a non-profit, makes decent money but still shops at Target for most things. Connor's expression shifted slightly at the name Rebecca, but he gestured for her to continue. She told me she'd pay premium prices for products that align with her values: sustainability, social responsibility, innovation. But most companies either lecture her about what she should value or assume she can't afford quality. Anderson could tap into that market by showing how their manufacturing process has evolved, how they're investing in environmental technology, how their employees are developing solutions for tomorrow's problems. You got all that from buying her coffee? I got that from asking what matters to you, instead of what do you think about our brand. Natalie swirled the wine in her glass, watching the emergency lighting reflect off the dark surface. People want to be understood, not surveyed. Connor was quiet for a long moment, studying her with an intensity that made her skin warm. That's not what they teach in business school. Business school teaches you how to analyze markets. It doesn't teach you how to understand people. And you think understanding people is more important? I think people are the market. Natalie met his gaze directly. Everything else is just data. The wind howled against the windows, rattling the glass despite the building's solid construction. Connor refilled both their glasses, and Natalie realized she'd finished hers faster than intended. What about you? She asked, emboldened by wine and curiosity. What made you want to build this company? Something shuddered in Connor's expression. Business opportunity. Market gap. Standard entrepreneurial motivation. The practiced answer of someone who'd been asked the question too many times. That's what you tell investors, Natalie said. What's the real reason? Connor took a long sip of wine, his eyes fixed on the storm beyond the windows. Control. Control over what? Everything. His voice was quiet but intense. Markets, outcomes, people's reactions. When you're in charge, you can ensure things work the way they're supposed to. There was pain behind that answer, old wounds carefully buried under professional success. And does it work? She asked softly. The control. Connor's laugh was bitter. You've met my staff. They're terrified of me. My interns quit faster than I can hire them. My board thinks I'm too demanding. My competitors think I'm ruthless, and He stopped himself, shaking his head. You're what? Nothing. Past tense. The storm outside seemed to intensify, as if responding to the emotional weather inside the office. Natalie wanted to push, to understand what had happened to make this brilliant, successful man wrap himself in such careful isolation. But something in his posture warned her off. Instead, she said, for what it's worth, I don't think you're as ruthless as you want people to believe. Connor's eyes snapped to hers. No. Ruthless bosses don't keep emergency supplies for stranded employees. They don't offer their personal space or share expensive wine with interns they barely know. Natalie leaned forward slightly. They definitely don't spend 9 hours letting said intern prove herself instead of just firing her for being presumptuous. Maybe I'm just practical. Maybe. Or maybe you're not as comfortable with isolation as you pretend to be. The silence stretched between them, charged with wine and proximity and the strange intimacy of being the only two people in a building surrounded by one of the worst storms in Chicago's history. Connor stood abruptly and moved to the windows, his back to her. You should get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Translation. Conversation over. But as Natalie arranged the couch cushions and Connor dimmed the lights, she caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Something vulnerable and uncertain, quickly hidden but impossible to completely disguise. Outside, the storm raged on, trapping them together until morning. Natalie woke to the sound of Connor's voice, low and urgent, carrying across the darkened office. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. The leather couch was more comfortable than her own bed, and the unfamiliar shadows confused her wine-fogged brain. Then reality crashed back. The blizzard, the emergency overnight, Connor Hayes's private office. "I don't care what the projections show, Rachel," Connor was saying into his phone, his back to her as he stood by the windows. "The Henderson deal falls through, and we lose 40% of our Q2 revenue." 2 a.m. phone calls about business deals. The man really never stopped working. Natalie tried to stay still, not wanting to eavesdrop, but Connor's tone shifted from professional frustration to something raw. "No, I haven't forgotten what day it is," he said quietly. 3 years, Rachel. I'm well aware of the anniversary." "Anniversary of what?" The conversation continued, but Connor's voice dropped too low for her to make out words. She caught fragments, something about lawyers, settlement agreements, trust funds. Business jargon that seemed to carry emotional weight far beyond its surface meaning. When Connor finally ended the call, he remained at the window for several minutes, his shoulders tense with whatever burden he'd been discussing. The emergency lighting cast his profile in sharp relief, highlighting the exhaustion etched around his eyes. "You can stop pretending to sleep," he said without turning around. "Busted." Natalie sat up, pushing her hair back from her face. "Sorry. I wasn't trying to listen." "But you heard enough to be curious." Connor moved away from the windows, settling into the chair he'd occupied earlier. "My lawyer." Some business that couldn't wait until morning, apparently. "On Valentine's Day?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Connor's smile was bitter. "Especially on Valentine's Day." The wine bottle sat half-empty on his desk, and Natalie noticed his glass was full again. She'd had enough experience with men drowning sorrows to recognize the signs. "Want to talk about it?" she asked carefully. "With my intern?" Hardly appropriate workplace conversation. "We passed appropriate workplace conversation somewhere around sharing wine at midnight during a blizzard," Natalie pointed out. "Besides, I'm a good listener. Part of why those consumer interviews worked so well." Connor studied her for a long moment, then took a sip of wine. 3 years ago today, my fiancé left me for my business partner." "Oh." The simple statement carried the weight of old pain, carefully controlled but not entirely healed. Natalie felt something shift in her chest, sympathy, understanding, the recognition of betrayal that cut deeper than professional disappointment. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "Rebecca Martinez. Beautiful, brilliant, ambitious." Connor's voice was clinical, as if discussing a failed business venture. "We met at Northwestern. She was getting her MBA while I was finishing my marketing degree. Perfect match, everyone said. Same goals, same values, same 5-year plan." Rebecca. The name that had made him flinch during their earlier conversation. "She helped me develop the business plan for Hayes Industries. Spent months refining projections, identifying target markets, building investor presentations. I proposed the night we landed our first major client." Natalie pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. "What happened?" "Marcus Webb happened." Connor's jaw tightened. "My best friend since college, the most talented creative director I'd ever worked with. I brought him in as a partner 6 months after we launched. Rebecca and I were planning a June wedding, talking about buying a house in Lincoln Park, building something together. The pieces were falling into place. The trust issues, the emotional walls, the way he'd structured his company to maintain complete control. Valentine's Day 3 years ago, I came home early to surprise her with dinner reservations at Alinea. Found them in our bedroom." Connor's voice remained steady, but his knuckles were white where they gripped the wine glass. Turns out they'd been sleeping together for months. Planning to leave Hayes Industries together, Start their own firm using my client contacts and business strategies. Connor. Natalie's heart ached for the man he'd been before betrayal taught him to armor himself in professional distance. The worst part wasn't the infidelity, he continued, staring into his wine. It was realizing how completely I'd misread both of them. I pride myself on understanding people, on seeing through facades to true motivations. But I lived with these two people for months while they systematically planned to destroy everything I'd built. No wonder he tested everyone, pushed them away before they could get close enough to hurt him. Did they succeed? Starting their own firm. Connor's smile was sharp. They lasted 8 months. Turns out stealing someone else's business plan doesn't compensate for lacking the vision to execute it. Rebecca works for a boutique agency in River North now. Marcus moved to California, last I heard. And you built this. Natalie gestured around the expensive office, the view of Chicago's skyline. Bigger and better than anything they could have imagined. Success is the best revenge, they say. But Connor's tone suggested the victory felt hollow. Though I'm starting to think isolation might be too high a price to pay for security. The admission surprised them both. Connor looked like he hadn't meant to say it, and Natalie felt the significance of being trusted with such honesty. Is that why you're so hard on interns? She asked gently. Testing their loyalty before they can get close enough to cause damage? Partly. Connor refilled his glass, then topped off hers without asking. Also because this industry demands excellence, and excellence requires pushing people beyond their comfort zones. But yes, I'd rather someone quit early than stick around long enough to become indispensable and then betray me. Except I didn't quit. No, Connor looked at her directly, something shifting in his expression. You didn't. The storm outside had quieted slightly, but the intimacy inside the office seemed to intensify. They were alone in a bubble of emergency lighting and shared secrets, the normal rules of professional distance suspended by extraordinary circumstances. Can I tell you something? Natalie asked, wine and exhaustion lowering her own defenses. Connor nodded. I almost didn't come to this interview. She tucked her feet under her on the couch. I researched your reputation, read all those reviews from former interns calling you impossible to work with. My parents thought I was crazy for wanting a job with someone who seemed determined to make people miserable. Smart parents. They are. But they've also spent their entire lives playing it safe, working for other people, never taking risks that might lead to something better. Natalie's voice grew stronger. My father has worked the same job for 22 years. Good job, steady paycheck, decent benefits. But he's never had the opportunity to see what he could really accomplish if someone believed in his potential. Connor listened without interrupting. I didn't want to spend my career wondering what might have happened if I'd been brave enough to work for the best, even if the best was difficult. She met his eyes. Maybe you're hard on people because you see their potential and you're frustrated when they don't live up to it. Or maybe I'm hard on people because I'm a control freak with trust issues. Maybe both things can be true. They sat in comfortable silence, the weight of shared confessions settling between them. Connor looked younger in the dim lighting, less like the intimidating CEO who'd made 43 interns quit and more like a man who'd built walls so high he'd forgotten what it felt like to let someone inside. Natalie, he said quietly. Yeah. Thank you. For staying, for pushing back, for... He gestured vaguely. For seeing something worth fighting for. The way he said her name, not Ms. Brooks, just Natalie, sent warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with wine. Thank you for letting me try, she replied. For giving me the chance to prove myself instead of just writing me off as another intern who wouldn't last. Connor stood and moved to the windows again, but this time his posture was less tense, more contemplative. Snow's stopping. Natalie joined him, their shoulders almost touching as they looked out at the transformed city. Chicago lay buried under at least 2 feet of snow, But the wind had calmed and the precipitation was lighter now, fat, lazy flakes instead of the earlier driving storm. "Beautiful," she murmured. "Dangerous but beautiful," Connor agreed. "Like a lot of things worth experiencing." When he turned to look at her, Natalie felt something electric pass between them. Recognition, attraction, the dangerous pull of two people who'd shared more honesty in one night than most colleagues shared in years. "We should get some sleep," Connor said, but he didn't move away from the window. "Tomorrow we'll need to dig out of this mess and get back to work." "Tomorrow," Natalie agreed, but her voice was soft, almost wondering. Because tonight had changed something between them, shifted the foundation of whatever their professional relationship had been building toward. Tomorrow they'd have to figure out what that meant. "Connor." "Yeah. I'm glad I stayed." His smile was different this time, genuine, unguarded, the expression of a man who'd forgotten how good it felt to trust someone enough to be vulnerable. "So am I, Natalie. So am I." Natalie woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Connor's voice, calm and professional as he spoke into his phone. Sunlight streamed through the massive windows, revealing a Chicago transformed into a winter wonderland. The city looked pristine under its blanket of snow, almost magical in the morning light. "Yes, Patricia, I understand the building's heating system is still compromised," Connor was saying as he paced near his desk, fully dressed in a fresh charcoal suit. "But we have the Anderson shoot scheduled for this afternoon, and I won't let a blizzard derail our timeline." Back to business. As if last night's vulnerability had been a temporary lapse in judgment. Natalie stretched on the leather couch, trying to shake off the intimacy of shared confessions and wine-fueled honesty. In the bright morning light, everything felt different, more complicated, more dangerous. She was still his intern, he was still her boss, and sleeping in his office during a snowstorm didn't change the fundamental power imbalance between them. Connor ended his call and turned toward her, coffee mug in hand. "Good morning. There's fresh coffee and bagels from the building's emergency kitchen. Maintenance managed to get basic food service running about an hour ago." "Thank you." Natalie sat up, acutely aware that she was wearing yesterday's clothes and probably looked like she'd spent the night on a couch. Which, technically, she had. "What's the situation outside?" "City's digging out, but it'll be hours before public transportation is fully operational. I've arranged for a car service to take you home when you're ready." Connor's tone was perfectly professional, but something in his eyes suggested he remembered every word they'd exchanged in the darkness. A car service. Expensive, thoughtful, and exactly the kind of gesture that blurred the lines between professional courtesy and personal care. "That's very generous, but I can manage." "Natalie." The way he said her name stopped her protest. "Let me do this." There it was again, her first name instead of the formalness Brooks, spoken with just enough warmth to remind her that something had shifted between them. She accepted the coffee he offered, their fingers brushing briefly during the exchange. The contact sent that same electric jolt up her arm, and from Connor's slight intake of breath, she suspected he felt it too. "The Anderson shoot," she said, focusing on safer territory. "Are we still moving forward despite the weather?" "Patricia's coordinating with the production team now. The studio space has backup power and heating, so we should be able to proceed as planned." Connor settled into the chair across from her, maintaining professional distance but watching her with an intensity that made her skin warm. "I want you there." "As an observer?" "As a contributor. The concepts were your ideas. You should see them come to life." The validation sent a thrill through her that had nothing to do with career advancement and everything to do with earning Connor Hayes' respect. They worked together for the next 2 hours, refining shot lists and reviewing creative briefs while Chicago slowly returned to life outside. The collaboration felt natural, easy in a way that surprised them both. Connor valued her input without condescension, and Natalie found herself contributing ideas with growing confidence. "The third video concept," Connor said, pointing to her notes. "The one about innovation heritage. Explain your vision for the opening sequence." Natalie moved to stand beside his chair, leaning over to point at specific elements on the page. Start with archival footage from Anderson's founding in 1924, but don't linger. Quick cuts showing evolution, horse-drawn delivery trucks becoming modern logistics, hand-drawn blueprints becoming digital design, old manufacturing equipment becoming cutting-edge robotics. Connor's proximity was distracting. She could smell his cologne, feel the warmth radiating from his body, catch glimpses of the way his dark hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck. "Soundtrack?" he asked, apparently unaffected by her closeness. "Something classical that builds into modern electronic music. The transition should mirror the visual evolution, traditional instruments layering with synthesized sounds until you can't tell where heritage ends and innovation begins." Brilliant. Connor looked up at her, and she realized how close they were standing. Close enough to see the gold flecks in his gray eyes, close enough to count the faint lines around them that suggested he smiled more than his reputation indicated. Close enough to kiss, if she were brave enough to lean down 6 inches. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility and the memory of last night's confessions. Natalie felt her breath catch as Connor's gaze dropped briefly to her lips, then returned to her eyes with an intensity that made her pulse race. "Natalie," he said quietly. The door burst open, breaking the spell like shattering glass. "Connor, the production team is ready to..." Patricia stopped mid-sentence, taking in the scene with sharp eyes. "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were working." The word working carried enough skepticism to sink a ship. Natalie stepped back quickly, professional distance reasserting itself like a physical barrier. "We were just reviewing the creative brief." "Of course." Patricia's smile was polite but knowing. "The car is waiting downstairs to take you to the studio. We should leave in the next 10 minutes if we want to stay on schedule." Connor stood, his expression returning to its usual controlled professionalism. "Excellent. Natalie, you'll ride with Patricia and brief the production team during the drive." Back to Ms. Brooks, apparently. The moment of intimacy relegated to a temporary lapse in judgment. But as Natalie gathered her materials and prepared to leave, Connor caught her arm gently. "Good work last night," he said quietly, his voice carrying layers of meaning. "The Anderson strategy, the insights about consumer behavior, all of it. You're exactly what this company needs." What this company needs. Not what he needs, specifically. Professional praise with careful boundaries. "Thank you," she replied formally. "I'm looking forward to seeing the concepts in production." But as she walked toward the door, she caught Connor's reflection in the window behind his desk. He was watching her leave with an expression that suggested their almost moment had affected him more than he was willing to admit. The production shoot was everything Natalie had imagined and more. Watching her concepts transform from paper ideas into visual reality felt like magic. Cameras capturing the kind of innovation stories that could revolutionize Anderson's brand perception. She worked alongside Patricia and Trevor, offering input on shots and helping coordinate the complex dance of lighting, sound, and performance that brought advertising campaigns to life. The production team treated her like a valued contributor rather than an intern, and she found herself thinking, "This is what I want to do with my life." "Natalie, what do you think about the lighting in this sequence?" Trevor called from behind the camera setup. She moved closer to evaluate the shot, a close-up of an Anderson engineer explaining next-generation manufacturing technology. "Can we add a subtle blue gel to suggest innovation and trust? And maybe position her near the equipment so viewers can see the actual technology she's discussing." "Perfect." Trevor made the adjustments, and the shot immediately improved. "You've got a good eye for this." Professional validation from someone other than Connor felt different, cleaner, less complicated by attraction and emotional undercurrents. During the lunch break, Patricia pulled her aside. "I owe you an apology," the older woman said, her tone more genuine than Natalie had heard before. "I was skeptical about your ideas yesterday. Impressed by your research, but skeptical about implementation." And now I'm watching concepts I've been struggling with for months come together in ways that feel natural and compelling. Patricia's smile was warm. Connor was right to champion your strategy. Connor was right to champion your strategy. He championed it. Spent an hour after you left yesterday convincing the rest of us to give your approach a full trial run. Argued for budget allocation, timeline adjustments, everything needed to make this happen. Patricia studied Natalie's face carefully. He doesn't usually go to bat for interns. Or anyone, really. Heat spread through Natalie's chest, gratitude, attraction, and something deeper that she didn't want to examine too closely. Her phone buzzed with a text from Connor. How's the shoot progressing? Need anything? Simple, professional, but the fact that he was checking in felt personal. She texted back, better than expected. The team is incredible, and the footage looks amazing. His response came immediately, proud of you. 2 words that shouldn't have meant so much, but somehow felt like the most important praise she'd ever received. The afternoon flew by in a blur of successful shots, creative collaboration, and the kind of professional satisfaction Natalie had only dreamed about. By the time they wrapped at 6 p.m., she felt like she'd found her place in the world. Drinks to celebrate, Trevor suggested as they packed up equipment. There's a great place in River North that should be open despite the snow. I'm in, Patricia said, surprising everyone. Today felt like a win worth acknowledging. Natalie was about to agree when her phone rang. Connor's name appeared on the screen, and her pulse quickened involuntarily. Natalie? How did everything go? Perfect. Better than perfect, actually. The footage is going to be incredible. I knew it would be. His voice carried genuine warmth. Listen, I'm still at the office dealing with some Anderson contract details. When you're finished celebrating with the team, would you mind stopping by? I have something I'd like to discuss with you. Something he'd like to discuss. In his office. Alone. Of course, she heard herself saying. I'll be there in a couple hours. Take your time. I'll be here. As Natalie hung up and rejoined the celebration plans, she couldn't shake the feeling that whatever Connor wanted to discuss would change everything between them. Again. The celebration drinks with Patricia and Trevor had been exactly what Natalie needed. Professional validation, industry connections, and the intoxicating feeling of belonging somewhere she'd only dreamed of working. 2 hours of discussing creative strategies and campaign development over craft cocktails in River North had cemented her belief that she'd found her calling. Now, standing outside Connor's office door at nearly 9 p.m., she felt that familiar flutter of anticipation mixed with something deeper, the memory of last night's intimacy, the morning's almost kiss, the way he texted proud of you like she mattered to him beyond her professional contributions. The building was quiet again, most employees long gone to dig their cars out of snow and return to normal life. Only Connor's office showed light, casting warm shadows into the hallway. She knocked softly and entered when he called out. Connor stood behind his desk, but something was different about his posture. Tense, controlled anger barely held in check. His suit jacket was off, his tie loosened, and his usually perfect hair looked like he'd been running his hands through it. Empty coffee cups and scattered papers suggested he'd been working furiously for hours. How was the celebration? He asked without looking up from whatever document held his attention. Good. Really good, actually. Patricia and Trevor both think the footage is going to exceed expectations. Natalie moved closer to his desk, trying to read his mood. The team gelled perfectly, and I think we captured exactly the innovation narrative we discussed. Excellent. Connor's tone was clipped, professional, completely different from the warmth she'd heard over the phone earlier. That's what I wanted to discuss with you. Something was wrong. The emotional distance from this morning had returned, but sharper now, edged with something that felt almost like hostility. Connor, is everything okay? Mr. Hayes, he corrected automatically, then seemed to catch himself. And yes, everything's fine. Better than fine, actually. He picked up a folder from his desk and handed it to her. Congratulations, Ms. Brooks. Your Anderson strategy has been so well received that I've had 3 other clients request similar campaigns. Patricia has recommended you for a permanent position on her team, and I'm inclined to approve it. This should have been the best news of her life. Dream job, career advancement, professional recognition, everything she'd worked toward. But Connor's delivery felt like a dismissal rather than a celebration. That's wonderful, she said carefully. Thank you for the opportunity. Don't thank me. You earned it. Connor moved to the windows, his back to her. Patricia will handle the paperwork and coordinate your transition from intern to junior account executive. Effective immediately. Effective immediately. Like he couldn't wait to get her out of his direct supervision. Will I still be working on the Anderson account? Primarily, yes. With Patricia's oversight, of course. Connor's reflection in the window showed a man fighting some internal battle. It's a significant opportunity for someone with your limited experience. Limited experience. The phrase stung more than it should have, especially coming from him. Connor, what's really going on? Natalie set the folder on his desk and moved closer. This morning you were proud of my work, and now you're acting like you can't wait to transfer me to another department. This morning was a mistake. Connor turned from the window, his expression carefully neutral. Last night was a mistake. Sharing wine, personal conversation, allowing professional boundaries to blur, all of it was inappropriate. The words hit her like physical blows. Inappropriate. You're an intern, Ms. Brooks. I'm the CEO. Regardless of what happened during an emergency situation, we can't pretend that normal professional protocols don't apply. Ms. Brooks again. The formal distance felt like a slap after the intimacy they'd shared. So you're punishing me for last night? Transferring me away because we had an honest conversation. I'm protecting both of us from a situation that could become complicated. Connor's jaw was tight, his control clearly costing him effort. You're talented, ambitious, and you deserve opportunities that aren't tainted by speculation about your relationship with your supervisor. My relationship with my supervisor? Natalie's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. What relationship? We talked. We shared wine during a blizzard. I didn't realize professional conversation constituted a scandal. But even as she said it, she knew they both remembered the moment that morning when they'd almost kissed, the electric tension that had nothing to do with business strategies. Connor moved behind his desk, putting physical barriers between them. Patricia will provide excellent mentorship, and you'll have opportunities to work with multiple clients instead of being limited to my accounts. Stop. Natalie's hands clenched into fists at her sides. Stop talking to me like I'm a problem to be solved or a liability to be managed. If you want me gone, just say so. I don't want you gone. The admission slipped out before Connor could stop it, revealing the crack in his professional armor. I want you to succeed without anyone being able to claim your advancement came from anything other than merit. And you think working directly with you would compromise that? I think. Connor hesitated, then seemed to steel himself. I think you're exactly the kind of woman who could make me forget why emotional distance is necessary in this business. The confession hung between them, raw and honest and terrifying. Connor. Which is exactly why this transfer is the right decision. Connor's voice hardened again. For both of us. Natalie felt something crack inside her chest, disappointment, anger, and hurt mixing into a toxic cocktail that made her reckless. You're a coward, she said quietly. Connor's eyes flashed. Excuse me. You heard me. You're a coward who's so afraid of being hurt again that you'd rather push away anyone who might actually matter to you. Natalie stepped closer to his desk, her own anger providing courage. Last night you told me about Rebecca, about Marcus, about how their betrayal taught you not to trust people. But you know what? They didn't just betray you, they turned you into someone who betrays himself. That's enough. Connor's voice was dangerous now. Is it? Because I think you're terrified that I might actually see past your CEO armor to the man underneath, and heaven forbid someone might care about Connor Hayes the person instead of Connor Hayes the corporate success story. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Natalie leaned forward, her hands braced on his desk. I think you're attracted to me. I think last night meant something to you, and this morning's almost kiss wasn't just professional proximity. I think you're transferring me because you're afraid of what might happen if we kept working together. Connor's silence was answer enough. But here's the thing, Natalie continued, her voice gaining strength. I'm not Rebecca. I'm not going to steal your business plans or sleep with your partners or disappear the moment something better comes along. I'm here because I believe in this work, in this company, and yes, in you. But apparently that's exactly what you can't handle. Connor stood slowly, his full height and professional authority bearing down on her. You're out of line, Ms. Brooks. Am I? Or am I the first person in 3 years brave enough to tell you the truth? Natalie straightened, meeting his stare without flinching. You've spent so much energy protecting yourself from betrayal that you can't recognize loyalty when it's standing right in front of you. The silence stretched between them, electric with anger and attraction and the terrible honesty of people who'd seen each other's vulnerabilities. Then Connor's expression shuttered completely, professional ice replacing the storm in his gray eyes. Patricia will handle your transition, he said coldly. I suggest you report to her first thing Monday morning and begin integrating with her team. The dismissal was final, absolute, and devastating. Natalie stared at him for a long moment, waiting for him to take it back, to admit he was scared, to fight for whatever was building between them. But Connor had retreated behind his CEO facade so completely that she might have imagined the vulnerable man who'd shared wine and confessions just hours before. Fine, she said quietly, gathering the folder and her dignity. Congratulations, Mr. Hayes. You've successfully protected yourself from another potential betrayal. I hope the isolation is worth it. She walked toward the door with her head high, refusing to let him see how much his rejection hurt. Natalie. Connor's voice stopped her at the threshold. She turned back, hope flaring despite her anger. Good luck with Patricia's team, he said formally. I'm sure you'll do excellent work. The hope died as quickly as it had sparked. Thank you for the opportunity, she replied with equal formality. I won't disappoint you. As she walked through the empty building toward the elevators, Natalie couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just lost something important. Not just a professional opportunity, but the chance to know the real Connor Hayes buried beneath layers of protective control. Behind her, Connor's office light stayed on long into the night. 4 days. For days since Connor had watched Natalie walk out of his office with her chin raised and her dignity intact, and he couldn't stop thinking about the look in her eyes when he dismissed her, hurt, disappointment, and something that might have been pity. You're a coward. Her words echoed in his mind at 3 in the morning when he couldn't sleep, during board meetings when he should have been focused on quarterly projections, and now as he stood outside Patricia's office watching Natalie collaborate with a creative team like she'd been born for this work. She looked different. Still stunning in that deep purple blouse that brought out the amber in her eyes, still commanding attention with every gesture, but there was a professional confidence that hadn't been there a week ago. She belonged here, and everyone could see it. The millennial demographic response to the Anderson campaign has exceeded all projections, Patricia was saying, pointing to charts displayed on her laptop. Engagement rates are up 43%, and we're seeing conversion metrics that frankly shocked the client. Natalie nodded, making notes in her leather portfolio. What about the heritage messaging? Are we seeing any negative response from Anderson's traditional customer base? Minimal. Less than 2% decline in brand favorability among the 45 to 65 demographic, which is well within acceptable parameters for market expansion. She was thriving. Exactly what Connor had hoped for when he'd made the transfer decision. So why did watching her success feel like losing something precious? Trevor looked up from his creative briefs and spotted Connor in the hallway. Connor. Perfect timing. You need to see these preliminary results from Natalie's campaign concepts. No escape now. Connor entered Patricia's office, maintaining professional distance as 5 pairs of eyes turned toward him. Natalie's gaze was polite but cool, not hostile, just carefully neutral. The warmth that had characterized their interactions before Friday night was gone, replaced by the kind of respectful formality she might show any senior executive. "Mr. Hayes," she said with a slight nod. Patricia was just reviewing the Anderson metrics. Mr. Hayes. Even after everything they'd shared, she was following his lead in maintaining professional boundaries. Impressive results, Connor said, forcing his attention to Patricia's laptop screen instead of the woman sitting 2 feet away. The client must be pleased. Ecstatic, Patricia confirmed. They're already discussing expanding the campaign to their entire product line, and 3 other companies have inquired about similar brand evolution strategies. 3 other companies. Because of Natalie's insights, her consumer research, her innovative approach to messaging that bridged heritage with relevance. Outstanding work, team, Connor said, the words feeling inadequate. Keep me posted on developments. He turned to leave, but Natalie's voice stopped him. Mr. Hayes, could I speak with you privately for a moment? I have some questions about the Henderson account integration. The Henderson account. Business. Safe territory. Of course. Connor gestured toward the hallway. My office. Actually, conference room C should be sufficient. This won't take long. Conference room C, neutral ground. No personal memories or intimate conversations to complicate professional discussion. They walked in silence through the hallway, past curious glances from employees who'd probably heard office gossip about the intern who'd lasted longer than a month with the impossible CEO. Connor wondered what they'd think if they knew the real reason for the transfer. Conference room C was smaller than the space where Natalie had first presented her Anderson strategy, with a simple table and 4 chairs. No windows, no distracting views of the city, nothing but fluorescent lighting and corporate functionality. Natalie closed the door and turned to face him, her expression professional but determined. There is no Henderson account integration, she said without preamble. Connor's eyebrows rose. Then why? Because Patricia told me what you did. Ah, I don't know what you mean. She told me you spent an hour after my presentation convincing the team to support my strategy. That you argued for budget allocation, timeline adjustments, everything needed to make the campaign successful. Natalie's voice was steady, but Connor caught the undercurrent of emotion. She also mentioned that you've never advocated for an intern before. Or anyone, really. Connor moved to the far side of the table, putting distance between them. Patricia talks too much. Patricia cares about this company and the people who work here. She's also not stupid. Natalie remained by the door, blocking his easy escape. She knows something happened between us, and she's worried you made the transfer decision for personal reasons rather than professional ones. The transfer was the right call. Was it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you threw away a productive working relationship because you were scared of your own feelings. There it was again, the directness that had attracted and terrified him from their first meeting. My feelings are irrelevant to business decisions. Are they? Natalie stepped closer, her dark eyes searching his face. Because the Connor Hayes I talked to Friday night seemed like someone who cared about more than just profit margins and quarterly reports. Friday night was a mistake. Friday night was honest. Her voice softened slightly. Maybe for the first time in 3 years, you let someone see who you really are underneath all the corporate armor. Connor felt his carefully constructed defenses wavering. Natalie. I know you're attracted to me, she continued, her confidence growing. "I know Friday night meant something to you, and I know you're terrified of what might happen if you admit it." She was right. About all of it. And that scared him more than any business failure ever could. "Even if that were true," he said carefully, "it doesn't change the fundamental problem. You work for this company. I run this company. Any relationship between us would be complicated? Yes. Impossible? I don't think so." Natalie moved around the table, closing the distance between them. "Unless you're still convinced that anyone who gets close to you is planning to betray you." The accusation hit its mark. Connor's jaw tightened. "Experience has taught me to be cautious. Experience with two people who proved themselves unworthy of your trust. That doesn't mean everyone else will follow the same pattern. Doesn't it?" Connor's voice carried 3 years of buried pain. "You have no idea what it's like to build something from nothing, to trust people with your vision and your future, only to discover they were planning to destroy it all along." "You're right," Natalie said quietly. "I don't know what that betrayal felt like. But I know what it looks like when someone lets fear make their decisions for them." The words stung because they were true. "I've built a successful company using those decisions." You've built a successful business. But what kind of life have you built? Natalie's voice was gentle now, understanding rather than accusatory. When was the last time you trusted someone enough to be vulnerable? When did you last let yourself care about something that wasn't protected by contracts and professional distance? Connor stared at her, seeing not just the brilliant strategist who'd revolutionized his client campaigns, but the woman who'd shared wine with him during a blizzard, who'd listened to his painful history without judgment, who'd called him a coward because she cared enough to tell him the truth. The woman he was falling for despite every logical reason to maintain distance. "Friday night," he admitted quietly. "What?" "You asked when I last let myself care about something unprotected by professional distance. Friday night. With you." The confession hung between them, raw and terrifying and honest. Natalie's expression softened. "Connor." "Which is exactly why the transfer was necessary." His voice grew stronger, defensive walls reasserting themselves. "I can't afford to make decisions based on emotions instead of logic." "Who says you have to choose?" Natalie stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her perfume, see the gold flecks in her dark eyes. "Who decided that caring about someone automatically makes you weak or stupid or destined for betrayal?" Rebecca and Marcus decided that. Their betrayal had written those rules in his mind, carved them into his heart with the precision of a surgical blade. "Some risks aren't worth taking," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "And some risks are the only things that make life worth living." They stood facing each other across 3 feet of conference room space and 3 years of emotional barriers. Connor felt the weight of his choice: retreat into safe isolation or take the terrifying step toward something real. His phone buzzed with a text. Without thinking, he glanced at the screen. Rachel Miller, his lawyer. Settlement finalized. Rebecca's non-compete expires next month. Thought you should know she's been contacting some of your clients. The message hit him like a physical blow. Rebecca, still trying to undermine his business 3 years later. Still proving that his caution was justified, that trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. Natalie must have seen something change in his expression. "What is it?" Connor pocketed his phone without answering. "I should get back to work." "Connor, wait. The transfer stands, Ms. Brooks. Patricia will provide excellent supervision for your career development." He moved toward the door, but Natalie's voice stopped him. "Running away doesn't make you safe, Connor. It just makes you alone." He paused at the threshold, his hand on the door handle, torn between the safety of isolation and the terrifying possibility of trust. "Some of us prefer alone," he said without turning around. Then he walked away, leaving Natalie standing in the empty conference room with the weight of his choice between them. Connor stared at the resignation letter on his desk for the third time in 10 minutes, the words blurring together as his mind refused to process what he was reading. Dear Mr. Hayes, please accept this letter as my formal notification of resignation from Hayes Industries, effective March 8, 2024. I have accepted a position with Brennan and Associates as a senior marketing strategist. Natalie was leaving. 3 days after their conversation in conference room C, one day after Rebecca had indeed contacted the Hartwell Group trying to poach Connor's second-largest client, and 6 hours after Connor had successfully defended his business from another attempt at sabotage, Natalie Brooks was walking away from Hayes Industries. From him. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent years protecting himself from betrayal, only to drive away the one person who'd never shown any intention of leaving. Monica knocked softly before entering. Mr. Hayes? Ms. Brooks is here to discuss her transition timeline. Of course she was. Professional to the end, ensuring her departure caused minimal disruption to ongoing projects. Send her in. Natalie entered wearing a navy dress that hugged her curves and projected the kind of confidence he'd watched her develop over the past 3 weeks. She looked successful, self-assured, and completely resolved in her decision to leave. She looked like she was moving on. Mr. Hayes. She placed a folder on his desk. Transition documents for all my current projects. Patricia has agreed to take over the Anderson campaign oversight, and I've prepared detailed notes for whoever handles the Hartwell integration. Connor picked up the folder without opening it. Brennan and Associates is a good firm. They offered me a senior strategist position with my own client portfolio and a team of junior associates. Natalie's tone was professionally neutral. It's an excellent opportunity. I'm sure it is. Connor stood and moved to the windows, the familiar view of Chicago offering no comfort. When do you start? March 11th. I wanted to ensure a smooth transition here first. Even leaving, she was thinking about the company's needs before her own convenience. Very considerate of you. Silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. Connor could feel Natalie watching him, could sense her waiting for something, an explanation, an apology, a reason to reconsider. He had all three, but the words wouldn't come. Connor. Her professional facade cracked slightly. Can I ask you something? He turned from the window. Of course. Do you regret it? Friday night, I mean. Talking to me, sharing what you shared. The question hit him like a physical blow. Regret talking to her? Regret the first genuine connection he'd felt in 3 years? Regret discovering that someone could see past his defenses and still choose to care about him? No, he said quietly. I don't regret it. Then why are you letting me walk away? Because I'm terrified of needing you. Because caring about you makes me vulnerable in ways I swore I'd never be again. Because if you betray me, it won't just destroy my business, it'll destroy me. Because your career shouldn't be limited by your supervisor's complications. Natalie stepped closer, her dark eyes searching his face. What if I don't want my career limited by your fears? The words hung between them, a challenge and an invitation wrapped in professional language. Connor's phone buzzed. Another text from Rachel about Rebecca's latest machinations, another reminder of why emotional distance was safer than trust. But as he looked at Natalie, really looked at her, he saw something Rebecca had never possessed. Integrity. Loyalty. The kind of strength that built things up instead of tearing them down. And suddenly, the choice became clear. Don't take the job, he said. Natalie's eyebrows rose. Excuse me. Brennan and Associates. Don't take the job. Connor moved closer, his heart hammering against his ribs. Stay here. Work with me, not for me. As an equal partner in a company that could become something extraordinary. Connor, what are you saying? I'm saying I've been an idiot. He reached for her hands, relief flooding through him when she didn't pull away. I'm saying you were right about everything. I am a coward. I have been letting fear make my decisions, and I've been so focused on protecting myself from betrayal that I almost betrayed myself. Her hands were warm in his, steady and real, and everything he'd been afraid to want. I'm saying I care about you, Natalie. More than I've cared about anyone in years, and yes, that terrifies me. But not as much as watching you walk away because I was too scared to fight for something real. Natalie's expression softened, hope flickering in her dark eyes. What exactly are you proposing? Partnership. In business and... Connor took a deep breath, the words feeling like stepping off a cliff. And in everything else, if you're willing to take a chance on someone who's still learning how to trust again. Connor Hayes asking someone to take a chance on him? Natalie's lips curved into the first genuine smile he'd seen from her in days. That's not very CEO-like behavior. Maybe it's time I remembered how to be human instead of just a CEO. She was quiet for a long moment, studying his face as if looking for cracks in his resolve. The partnership offer, she said carefully. You're serious? Dead serious. I've been thinking about it since the Anderson campaign launched. You have the vision, the client intuition, the strategic mind that could take this company to the next level. Patricia agrees, Trevor agrees, even the board would support it after seeing your results. And the personal part. Connor squeezed her hands gently. I'm asking you to dinner. Tonight. Not as your supervisor, not as a business colleague, but as a man who's finally brave enough to admit he's falling for an incredible woman. Natalie's smile widened, transforming her entire face. You know office relationships are complicated, she said teasingly. Good thing we'll be equals. Partners don't have supervisor-subordinate complications. And if it doesn't work out? If we try this and discover we're better as colleagues than as, whatever this becomes. Connor lifted one hand to cup her face, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. Then we'll handle it like adults who respect each other. But Natalie? I don't think that's going to be a problem. When he kissed her, it felt like coming home to a place he'd never known he was searching for. She tasted like possibility and promises, like the future he'd been too afraid to imagine. They broke apart slowly, foreheads touching, breathing the same air. So, Natalie murmured against his lips. Partner Hayes. Partner Brooks, he confirmed. Think you can handle working with someone as demanding as me? Think you can handle working with someone who won't back down when you're being unreasonable? Connor's laugh was rich and genuine, the sound of walls crumbling and possibilities opening. I'm counting on it. 6 months later, the Hayes and Brooks Industries office occupied the entire 34th floor of the Millennium Plaza Tower, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of Lake Michigan and downtown Chicago. Awards lined the walls, industry recognition for innovative campaigns that had revolutionized how established brands connected with evolving demographics. Natalie stood in the main conference room, presenting their latest strategy to a potential client, her confidence radiating through every gesture. She wore an emerald suit that brought out the amber in her eyes, and when she smiled at a particularly insightful question, Connor felt the same jolt of attraction he'd experienced during their first meeting. Some things never changed. The key to sustainable brand evolution, Natalie was explaining, is understanding that heritage and innovation aren't opposite forces. They're complementary strengths that, when properly aligned, create emotional resonance across generational demographics. Connor watched from the back of the room, ostensibly taking notes but actually just admiring the woman who'd become his partner in every sense of the word. The client, a century-old furniture manufacturer struggling with declining sales, hung on her every word. Ms. Brooks raises an excellent point, Connor interjected, moving to stand beside her at the presentation screen. Our Anderson Corporation case study demonstrates exactly this principle in action. They moved through the presentation seamlessly, finishing each other's thoughts, building on each other's insights, creating the kind of dynamic collaboration that made clients believe in possibilities they'd never considered. This was what partnership looked like, professional respect, intellectual equality, and the kind of trust that made both of them stronger. An hour later, after the client had enthusiastically agreed to a comprehensive brand strategy engagement, Connor and Natalie found themselves alone in the conference room, cleaning up presentation materials. "Another successful pitch," Natalie said, stacking folders with the efficiency of someone who'd done this hundreds of times. "We make a good team. The best." She looked up at him, the professional confidence giving way to something softer, more personal. "In all the ways that matter." Connor moved closer, his hand settling on her waist with the familiarity of 6 months together. "Dinner tonight? I made reservations at that new place in River North you wanted to try." "Can't. Ashley's bachelorette party, remember?" Natalie's arms looped around his neck. "But tomorrow I'm all yours. I'll hold you to that." When he kissed her this time, it carried the weight of shared success, mutual respect, and the kind of love that had grown slowly from professional admiration to deep personal connection. They broke apart as Monica knocked on the conference room door. "Mr. Hayes? Ms. Brooks? The quarterly reports are ready for your review, and there's someone here to see you both." "Who?" Connor asked, still holding Natalie close. Monica's smile was knowing. "Patricia. She says she has news about the Hartwell expansion project that couldn't wait until Monday." Patricia had become their unofficial third partner, handling operations while Connor and Natalie focused on strategy and client development. Her transition from skeptical supervisor to trusted friend had been one of the unexpected gifts of their professional evolution. "Send her in," Natalie said, stepping back from Connor but not entirely out of his arms. Patricia entered with an armload of documents and the kind of excited energy that suggested excellent news. "The Hartwell Group just approved our proposal for their international expansion campaign," she announced without preamble. "Full budget approval, 18-month timeline, and they want to use our brand evolution model for their European launch." Connor felt Natalie's sharp intake of breath, her excitement matching his own. "Patricia, that's incredible," Natalie said. "The international market has been our goal since about 3 months into our partnership," Connor finished. "This changes everything. It means we'll need to hire at least 6 new staff members, expand our creative department, and probably look into additional office space," Patricia added practically. "But yes, it changes everything." As Patricia outlined the logistics of their expansion, Connor caught Natalie's eye across the conference table. She was glowing with professional satisfaction, her dark eyes bright with possibilities and plans. This was what success looked like, not just personal achievement, but shared vision made reality. Later that evening, as Chicago's skyline glittered beyond their office windows, Connor and Natalie stood together reviewing the Hartwell contracts. The building was quiet around them, most employees gone home to families and weekend plans. "Remember when you thought I wouldn't last a week?" Natalie asked, leaning against his shoulder as they examined budget projections. "I remember thinking you were either incredibly brave or completely insane to challenge me in that first meeting. And now..." Connor set down the contracts and turned to face her fully. "Now I think you were exactly what I needed, even when I was too scared to admit it." She smiled, the kind of radiant expression that still made his heart skip beats. "So what happens next, partner Hayes?" "Next, we build something extraordinary together." Connor pulled her closer, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. In business and in everything else. Outside, snow began to fall again, not the fierce blizzard that had first trapped them together, but gentle flakes that caught the light like promises drifting down from the October sky. "I love you, Natalie Brooks." The words came easily now, honest and unguarded, spoken by a man who'd learned that the greatest risk was refusing to take any risks at all. "I love you too, Connor Hayes." When she kissed him this time, it tasted like forever, like partnership and passion, like the future they were building together, one successful campaign, one shared victory, one honest moment at a time. Some stories end with declarations of love. This one began with them. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.